Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and you are attending the Document Automation webinar from Attorney Computer Systems. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about using PracticeMaster to automate the documents that your firm produces on a daily basis to whatever level you wish to do so. We'll get more into that in a minute, but first a little bit of housekeeping. This is your GoToWebinar control panel. If you are still seeing this, it is because you have not clicked this little button that looks like an arrow pointing to the right, because once you click that arrow pointing to the right button, this will go away. It'll slide right off the right-hand side of your screen. This button at that point will turn into an arrow pointing to the left. It will still be visible. This little panel of buttons here will still be visible. And clicking that arrow that points to the left will cause this to slide back into focus. Why would you want to have it slide back into focus? Because you are shy and you have a question. If you're shy and you have a question, you may type it here. Don't forget to hit the send button. Leanne, our humble moderator, will recognize that you have a question. She'll interrupt me at just the right time, and she will ask your question on your behalf. Keep in mind that I inherited a trait from my mother. I talk in tangents. I will tend to get off track, or I may not answer the question that you intended to ask. Or you may have follow-up questions once I do answer the question that you intend to ask. All of those situations should cause you to type those follow-up questions or those prompts that are going to keep me on track here, remembering always to hit send, and Leanne will intervene and keep me on track or ask your additional question or make sure that your question gets answered. Now, if you're not feeling shy, you can press this button here. It looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upward in front of it. That means raise your hand. If you raise your hand, Leanne will do the same thing. She will recognize that you have raised your hand. She will interrupt me at the opportune time. But then what she'll do is she'll unmute your microphone and let you ask your own question. That microphone will remain unmuted. That channel of communication with me will remain open until I finish answering your question. So again, keep interrupting me if I'm getting off track, or if you have follow-up questions, or if you need to ask additional questions. So without any further ado, I will now press these magic buttons that take me to where I want to be, which is going to be PracticeMaster. Now I have a feeling that, nope, I do. I have the exact matter up in the sample data. I guess I'm more prepared than I may realize. I'm going to close a few things, and I'm going to take us back to this main screen here, and I'm going to explain how document assembly works in PracticeMaster. We're going to go take a look at a couple of examples. We're going to look at what your avenues are if you want to try to do this yourself, or your avenues if you want to have us do it for you, or any combination of those. So let's start with how it works. I'm going to go to the client screen. Document assembly is going to always be available here. It's going to always, in the client screen, be available here under Quick Clicks, Take Action. If you're in the Matter Manager, it's also available. It's down where the buttons appear. So when you have a matter on the screen that you want to assemble a document for, you simply press Word Document Assembly and it goes. Now, there is also a button that can be pressed whether or not you have a client in front of you. The only difference there is that when you press this button, it'll ask which client you want to assemble a document for. When you press this link over here, it takes you straight to the list of documents because it assumes that you want to do this Word document assembly for whichever client you have highlighted in the list or you are displaying in the data views. Now, before we look at a document, let's look over here at this people file. This, and now we've got some sample data in here, so you'll notice we have all sorts of phone numbers for this Robert Foosball guy. This, we have all the addresses in here. We have who he's representing. This is the people file. And you'll hear me talk about the people file a lot. It is the way that we recommend that your data be organized. But keep in mind, it doesn't have to be organized this way to do document assembly. It is just that we have decided over the years that we've been doing this, that organizing your people this way gives us the best flexibility in quickly automating your documents for you. It also gives the attorneys and the paralegals and anybody in the firm that wants to instantly know who's tied to a case, a single screen to go and highlight people involved in the case and be able to see at a glance what their contact information is. Now, these, of course, are contact records. So just one more bit of preamble on how we set up the data structure. Robert Foosball is an attorney at this firm. He is in the contact file, and he is tied with a people record to every matter that he's tied to. So he's got one contact record. There may be hundreds of matters in the system that he's supposed to be tied to, and for each one we simply create a record that ties him to that matter under this role. In this example, LW responsible attorney. Now he may be tied to other matters in a different role, perhaps LW assisting attorney. A better example of how this works is, let's take an opposing counsel on this case. I think that the opposing counsel is Jim Jones, and he works at Jones & Jones, and he may be tied to, let's say, 17 different cases that the firm currently has in process. But he's not always tied as opposing counsel. Sometimes he may be an expert witness, sometimes he may be a moderator or an arbitrator. So Jim Jones is going to have one record in the contact file. He's got 17, we've got 17 matters that he's tied to. 10 of them he is opposing counsel. One of them he happens to be co-counsel. 3 of the remaining 6 he's set up as an arbitrator because he also does some arbitration and mediation. And the remaining 3, let's say he happens to be an expert on truck accident litigation and reconstruction. So sometimes we use him as an expert witness, or maybe he's tied with the opposing counsel's side. He's tied to the case as an expert witness. Whether he's our expert witness or not remains to be seen and really doesn't matter in this example. But the point is there's one contact record for Jim Jones, and he is tied to these 17 matters under different roles. That's very important to understand because you really only want one contact record. You don't want to type Jim Jones's information 17 times. And you want to be able, when Jones & Jones moves across town or across the street, you want to be able to go into his one contact record and change his address and have it change for every matter that he's currently tied to. That's very important, and that's an underlying bit of significance about how our system is set up. Now, the fact that we use the people file to tie that together, and other people may have fields that specifically represent opposing attorney and medical providers and defendants and plaintiffs, that's neither here nor there, but you can do the document assembly regardless of how your data is set up. But how your data is set up has a very big role in how easy it is to maintain those documents and how easy it is to initially create them. So that said, let's go assemble a document. I've got this matter here. I believe it's Paul Perdue versus Weatherman. We sometimes have trouble here coming up with unique and exciting sample data. We won't go into any detail there. I am the worst at it. I'm going to click on Word Document Assembly. It's going to pop up and say, what do you want to assemble? Let's start with the WOW document. This is an appearance. It's a fully formed, fully captioned, complete with cert of service pleading. I am going to show the assembly, and I think I may have selected the wrong document. Leanne is watching over here. She's going to help me set this up. It worked just now when I did it. Cast include does not exist. Okay. Leanne is going to go look at this document. I swear I just did these. I wonder if I mistakenly deleted something, Leanne, when I was in the file view. I'm going to go on to a different document. I'm going to cross my fingers. You know what, I'm going to do it the way I was doing it. I'm going to, real quickly before I go on, maybe when we set this up, based on the data that's in PracticeMaster. Now what you see first is it going through a lot of preamble to decide whether it thinks it has multiple plaintiffs or single plaintiff, multiple defendants or a single defendant. And then what you'll notice, if we just move this box aside, is that because we have multiple plaintiffs and multiple defendants, it's calling them plaintiffs and defendants. If we only had Paul Perdue as the defendant, we would only have the word defendant here with no S. That's important because your document assembly needs to be very, very smart. It needs to be able to take a whole bunch of different things into account, and it needs to be able to handle a whole bunch of different situations. The goal in assembling the documents this way is to allow you to basically select the matter, select the document, and be done without any need to go back and clean up the document afterwards, without any need to go in and add this or change this word because it was multiple plaintiffs instead of a single. All that should be handled by the logic that's in the document. Now, that's of course in a perfect world. It's a matter of the skill level of the person that's doing the document coding. It's a matter of how much time there is to do this document coding, and it's really a matter of how much the firm wants to get into automating to that level. In my mind, that's the way it should be, because that's what I do. I build infrastructure for law firms. We have clients that have taken it to that level. We have other clients that have been more simple in their approach to document coding and what they have it do. But I want to point that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish this document. It's asking me right now if it's responding or intervening. And I'm going to say R for responding. It's going to ask me a few more questions, and I'll answer them as we go. Are there other party members? No. Will we accept service by fax? Yep. Does it involve a support issue? Are there related cases? Has this form been served on all other parties? No. Based on my answers to those questions, it branches off and includes different sections. Sometimes we'll branch to a different section, and that section will contain a question that's relevant only when that section is included in the document. This allows us to have multiple branches in a single document. One of the things I see when we go into a firm and do document coding for somebody that's already kind of started is they will have a different document for every single thing when it's really the same document. They'll have a pleading for an answer if it's a response, and they'll have a separate pleading for an answer if it's an appearance if it's initiating. They'll have a separate will for the spouse and a separate will for the client. Our goal is to combine this all into one and to use logic to build the document the way it's supposed to be. Now again, this has a lot to do with how much time is taken up front to make these documents perform. But it's a direct correlation between that and how little time it takes to assemble them when all is said and done. Right now it's saying on the next screen, select the LW attorney, Lewis and Worthington, that will be signing the certificate of service. So I'm going to hit enter to acknowledge that, and I'm going to say that it is Robert Fussball, simply by clicking on him, and we're done. Takes me to the top. It says assembly complete. Now what it's done then is it has completely assembled this caption the way that it needs to be. Based on the answers to my questions, it's included certain sections and excluded certain others. It has put X's in the appropriate place. It has listed the attorney information. We'll go through to the rest. The pleading itself is being signed by both attorneys, counsel for the defendants. And the cert of service includes these people. You'll note that even though there are two attorneys from Lewis and Worthington, there is one entry for them. And that was a bit of a logic that we added. And then, as I said, when I identified Robert Fussball as the actual attorney from the firm that's signing the cert of service. Now, in some firms, we have another document that goes along with it, or it's attached to this one that actually prints the labels for these cert mailings to go out in the mail. But that's the goal. The goal is get to a point where you have one appearance. When the people that are going to assemble this document select it, it asks a few simple questions that legal assistant should know, or paralegal should know the answer to, and it goes through and does the document. Nothing should need to be done at the end. But I will point out that we do end up in this screen in Word with the ability to do anything we want to this document at this point. If we do have something that's unique to this particular document, some clause that's going to be inserted that specifically applies to this case and would not apply in any other case. Leanne, we have a question.
Yes, Kevin has a question he's typed in, but also his hand is up, so I'm not sure if he wants to speak. So Kevin, I'm going to unmute you now and give you the opportunity. Kevin, if you'd like to ask your question yourself.
Are you there, Kevin?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I think I might have answered it. It appears that I'm in 16.2, that if I'm in the client window, I can see the document management under quick links, but if I'm in the related party window, I cannot see that. Or is there a way to get that to show if I want to do a letter with respect to that related party only?
If you're going to do a letter with respect to the related party only, it needs to be started from here. And there's a couple tricks. Usually, document assembly is intended to center around a matter. However, if you do not put a matter in, it will still allow you then to open up the contact screen as part of the document coding, just like we opened up the people screen to let it select which attorney from the firm was going to sign the cert of service. And then you can select your contacts or related parties from that screen and go ahead and do document assembly for that without having to do a matter. But there is nothing under quick clicks on the contact screen. That's something that only appears over here in the client screen because, as I said, originally as it was designed, document assembly is intended for being around a matter.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So now I'm going to go on and I'm going to do a couple more things that have certain wow factors. Obviously, I want to show you some of the really neat things that can be done if the person who's doing the coding really gets down to the nitty-gritty and applies themselves and thinks these things through. So I'm going to go back into Word document assembly, and I'm going to do a client letter. And here it's asking, select the person the letter will be from. And I'm going to choose Robert Foosball as being the responsible attorney who is assembling this, or who is writing this letter to the client to acknowledge a new matter. And then it says, who's it going to be to? Now, I'm going to go ahead and say OK and get to that next screen. And I'm going to say it's to the client, which is down here as the defendant. But I'm also going to say that it is to the insurer. Now, that may or may not be the situation in how your firm is going to acknowledge a case. And this, of course, is an example that's insurance defense related, and you may not even be doing that. But the reason I say that is because I want to point out that we then are able to pump in both addresses. Now, they look funny now, but in a minute, they're going to pump into a set of tables, and they're going to line up perfectly. Is there an insurance company? If yes, choose the insurance company. On the next screen, we'll say yes, and we will choose this insurance company. And there are two people that are going to be referred to at the bottom of the letter as who you might also contact at the firm if you have questions. Now, Robert Foosball is writing the letter, so I'm going to say that Tony Smith, the assisting attorney, and Thomas Shaw, the paralegal, are also people that this client might come back to and ask questions of. Now, we do it this way because this was done for a client with a particular need, and they might have 6 or 7 assisting attorneys on a major case, but the responsible attorney may only want the client coming back to himself and 2 other people. So we let the person who's assembling the document We also let them come in and select what insurance company to use the claim number for. But we also could have looked. I want to make that clear. In our logic, we could have looped through the people records and said, who are the other attorneys that are on this case? Let's just list them all as who the client can contact. But that's not what our client wanted. And we could have also looped through the insurers, but we might be getting a matter where we have actually 3 different insurance companies that have all come together to hire us to do this matter. So for this particular client, this particular law firm, we coded this letter to ask which insurer we should use the claim number from in the reline in the letter. I hope that makes sense. What I'm getting at basically is we have a lot of flexibility. We can just go out and say, let's list all the other attorneys as people that the client may contact, or we can present the user with a screen where they'll say, no, they should contact Thomas or Tony. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. We're going to let it finish up. We want to select who will be CC'd, and I'm just going to select a couple random people. Jim Jones might be CC'd, and it wants to know who might be BCC'd, and I'm going to say that Jeff Gordon, who's probably not a good candidate for BCCing since he's a member of the firm, but I'm just going to select a name, and it's done. Now what it's done, and I don't have any letterhead up here, obviously we would have pre-coded letterhead, or if a firm is still printing on letterhead directly, which is, we have a few clients that are still doing that. It's put in the name, the direct dial phone number, and the email address of the attorney. It's put in the date. It's put in the 2 addresses. If there were 4 people that we were writing to, it would just continue this table down and have them lined up. It's put in the description of the case, the cause number, our file number, and basically it's writing a standard letter to acknowledge receipt of a case, signing it with Robert Foosball, the standard includes and initials of people that are writing and producing the letter, the CCs, the BCCs. Many of our clients will have us in a CC or a BC. If it's a claim rep that's being CC'd, we'll have us put the cause number or the claim number actually into the right next to that person. And this particular firm has what we call an FYI list in addition to a CC and a BCC, where it lists that all the people that are in the firm and tied to the matter should be also copied on this document as it's being sent out. One more document that I want to produce for you. Just get out of Word here, close these things up. Last document to do as we explain how this works is a simple letter. We, by the way, can drop this letter into anybody's PracticeMaster. If you want to play with this letter, just let me know, and I'll send you a copy of it. Now, that's with the caveat that it's assuming that you have a people file. It's assuming that your documents, that your PracticeMaster fields are named a certain way. So it's not really something that you can probably just drop right in and go, but you can take it and look at it. You can see how we're doing things. You can change field names if it's appropriate, and you can actually start to work with it. It's a great learning tool. But this is our standard Skelton letter. So again, who's it from? And we'll do Robert Foosball. Who's it to? Again, we'll do the 2 people. We'll just pick the first 2 people in line, even though they may not make sense from a case data standpoint. And who's being BCC'd or CC'd, and who's being BCC'd. And we're done. Now, what's the difference here? This is just a standard letter. This is your catch-all letter. If you have a letter that does accepts cases and acknowledges them, great. If you have a letter that requests medical records, great. If you have a letter for this, that, or the other thing, great. Code them and make them pop out automatically with all the language filled in. This is the letter that gets used when none of those that are already pre-coded apply. You still are going to write a lot of letters to people that maybe it's just a letter, okay? And so uses the same sort of technology, the same sort of logic in how it's assembled, and lets you pretty much do whatever you want. Now, I want to point out here that this isn't rocket science, okay? And in order to point that out, I'm gonna go in here, and I'm gonna actually, instead of double-clicking on this appearance, I'm going to right-click and choose Open, and that actually opens the template file. Now, you'll look at this and say, well, it sure looks like rocket science to me. However, there are some people that look at this and say, gosh, I kind of understand what's going on here. Now, beyond that, we have a PracticeMaster toolbar, and these codes aren't being typed in by hand. These codes are being inserted by the variable file logic tickler include code buttons in the document assembly toolbar. So keep in mind, you don't need to understand exactly how these codes are structured, but you do need to have a certain logical bent, a certain logical orientation that makes you think in these terms. Not everybody has this, and so if you have somebody in your firm that's like that, that's great. Now, the other thing that this person that may be doing this work in your firm would need would be a certain knowledge of how cases move through your firm. So if you have a file clerk that's never filed an appearance or any sort of pleading or done anything with managing a case, they're probably not a good candidate, even if they have the computer background and the logical orientation and that sort of thing. Now, the third thing that somebody needs in order for this to work is time. These documents don't just assemble them, or they don't just build themselves, okay? So some of our clients have somebody like that. They have somebody who's got the knowledge, who's got the logical orientation, and who's got the time. Usually, unfortunately, the time is the thing that people don't have. If somebody's got the knowledge of how the firm runs, and they've got this computer orientation, and they can logically see how things fit together, then they're usually busy doing things. They're usually busy doing legal work. And on the flip side, if somebody's got a lot of time, it's probably because they don't have those skill sets. Because if they had the skill sets, they'd be doing other things. So we can help you with your document assembly, with your document coding projects in whatever level you want. We can come in and we can do absolutely everything with nobody at the firm having to do anything, or we can come in and work with somebody to get them to the point where they're capable of doing this and maintaining this document store until they leave the firm. And we can do everything in between. I am not going to try to convince you that this is something that just anybody is going to be able to pick up without any help at all. Now, unfortunately, there's not much documentation on this. In fact, I kind of was a little bit surprised. I went to tabs3.com just before we got going here, and I clicked on support and went to documentation because I knew that's where I'd find it. And I was a little bit surprised to find that there is no documentation at all on how to code documents. So at that point, you kind of get to the situation where you need to go down here to older versions, because document coding has not changed between version 16 and version 17. In the old days, prior to version 17, we didn't have as many guides as we have now, and we had manuals. The manuals were kind of cumbersome and a little scary, but that's all we had. And so if you go to the PracticeMaster version 16 manual, you're going to find a section in there on coding documents. It's going to give you what you need to get started, what you need to understand the toolbar, what you need to understand how to insert fields and how to select files and how to do some of the logic that's there. What that's not going to teach you at all is the logic. The logic that lets you know that, well, we need to loop through this table and decide who the other LW responsible attorney is and include their name, and we use if-then statements and logic to do that. And so that's the kind of thing that we can help you with. So if you want to learn how to do this, we're there for you. If you want to have us do it all for you, we're there for you there. Or if you want to do a combination, maybe have us come in and do a little bit of document coding for you to get some of the initial stuff done, and at the same time use that as a tool to train somebody, and then let that person go in and modify the documents from there on. That's all. Well, I won't say that's all I have to say about document coding. I could go on talking about document coding for hours and hours. It is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. That's all I'm going to say today in this webinar about document coding. If you have more questions, if you'd like that free copy of the letter template, we'll even give you a free copy of the people file. And if you need a little help getting it installed, well, we can bill you an hour for that. But a lot of our clients have taken that and just gone and played with it on their own. Just send me an email. My email address is probably going to be on the screen, but I'll also say it. It's paul.purdue, like the school, not the chicken, P-U-R-D-U-E, paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com. Leanne's letting me know that we have another question or two. Leanne, what do we have?
Let's see. Christian asks, we have PracticeMaster version 17.1, and they use hot docs for all of their letters, forms, and documents.
Oh.
Is there a way to continue to use our hot docs library and integrate PracticeMaster fields with those templates so we don't have to duplicate typing information?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't even cover that. I'm glad you asked this. You'll notice as we go back to this screen that there is hot docs document assembly and there's Word document assembly. Let me give you a little bit of background first. Back in the day when PracticeMaster first came out, it was actually called CaseMaster, and you had to have hot docs to do document assembly, whether you were using Word or WordPerfect. As time went on, Word got to a point where there was enough programming and hooks into it that the people at Software Technology, the people that make PracticeMaster, were able to code, to write direct Word document assembly that did not require hot docs in the middle. So most of the work that we do today is direct to Word. Why? Well, and I'll be frank, it's a little easier to code documents with hot docs because there are certain things built into hot docs that you have to do from scratch when you're doing it straight from PracticeMaster to Word. But you've also got to pay $800 for each developer license of hot docs and $330 for each assembler license. So if you have a staff of, let's say, 10 legal assistants plus one person that's going to code your documents and assemble them, then you're going to pay $800 plus $3,300, a total of $4,100. Wow, I'm surprised I could do that in my head, to get hot docs. And so firms tend to lean toward doing document assembly in Word. So the question was, can we use hot docs? Yes. Now, I'm assuming that when you say you do your document assembly in hot docs, that means that you're not doing it from PracticeMaster at all. And so I'm assuming that you've either gone out and bought a hot docs library or developed one yourself, and you've got your forms in there, but now you're asking, hey, can I hook this into PracticeMaster? Yes, you can. Basically what you're doing is you're creating cross-reference files that take the field in PracticeMaster and map it to a corresponding field that you've already developed in hot docs so that it knows, okay, now that these two are hooked together, this is where you get this field from PracticeMaster. It's a little bit different as to how you approach it, but the result is going to be very largely the same. So yes, the answer to your question is it is possible to do that. You'll find a little bit of information on STI's site, and you're always welcome to call me or email me and ask me questions. Is that it for the questions, Leanne?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Very good. I will point out that if you do go to our website, which is attorneycomputersystems.com, notice how I emphasize the S that's at the end of systems, that you will be able to see all of our video content, including our 3 virtual user group meetings, one on PracticeMaster, one on tabs, one on World Docs. Our Coffee Pot webinars, which is what you're attending right now. Mary Jo has her eBytes video series that is little short snippets of information on PracticeMaster tabs and World Docs. And our TV show format that we call the Paul and Mary Jo Show. Yes, we actually call it the Paul and Mary Jo Show. And this is where we take a kind of a meaty topic and spend a great deal of time with it, maybe 15, 20, 25 minutes. If you go to the Coffee Pot webinars, for instance, you will see registration information for the next webinar, which happens to be the one that you're attending right now. And as you scroll down, you will see recorded versions of all the other Coffee Pot webinars that we've ever done in descending order. Is that right? Descending order. So there's a lot of content here. There's a lot of other information on other things that you can do with tabs and PracticeMaster and World Docs, whether it be in one of our Coffee Pot webinars like we're in now, or one of the virtual user group meetings, or one of our other series of videos. So please, please take advantage of all that video content and learn all that you can. Thanks very much for attending. We'll hope to see you next month. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.